Present.
And Co-Chair Renner.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, great. First up on the agenda is a consideration from the August 25th, 2020. Remember that year? Sustainability and Community meeting in meeting minutes. Do we have any comments, changes, addendums?
No, I think that was Ally's first meeting though, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Everybody.
Okay, Glenn, you want to call the roll call or voice vote, whatever?
It'll have to be all motions this evening, I should mention, because of COVID-19, will have to be by roll call. With that said, Member Bishop,
Yes.
Member Sorensen,
Yes.
Member Twitchell,
Yes.
Co-Chair Purrier,
Yes.
and Co-Chair Renner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. I had to read the next one. I'm not sure if anyone else is online, but the next is non-agenda items. We allow 15 minutes for anyone to speak on an item that is not currently on the agenda. Glenn, do we have anyone else online? I don't see anyone.
We do have 3 individuals joining us from the public. So if you're here to comment on something not on tonight's agenda, you can use the raise hand button down at the bottom of the screen. We're happy to give you the opportunity to speak. Otherwise, we will continue on.
And if you are want to speak about the agenda, we will allow you to speak during those items. So, all right. So Glenn, why don't you take us on to tonight's general business?
Certainly. So the biggest item of substantive item of business, aside from, we'll talk about a litany of things during staff report, but the primary item on your agenda tonight is a backyard chicken application at 312, East Scranton Avenue, and that's Miss Fowler, the Fowler family. So by way of introduction, before we get into this application, a few months earlier this year, I guess is the best way of describing it, the village board made permanent, or at least indefinite, if you would, the backyard chicken pilot program, right? So the text of that, the text we're working with hasn't been codified yet. Again, it takes a little bit. We group these up to work into the village code. But it looks a lot like your pilot program, again, just bearing in mind that it's indefinite now. So a couple of tweaks I would note. One is that, the lot size strict restrictions are no longer present. Another would be that a renewal application doesn't continue to require, that the applicant come back before you. I mean, that's certainly possible, but again, as the pilot is concluded, as there wasn't, not necessarily a need to continue to gather information, didn't necessarily want to keep that requirement in there. I think those are the most important points. Again, there's still this requirement that a new applicant is reviewed by this commission, that you make a recommendation before they get a license. And then many of the other standards apply, again, as far as the number of chickens, not having roosters, all of these things that were made in the pilot program to make sure that these activities didn't cause a nuisance, anything like that. So before I get into the application itself, I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay. So the application you have before you tonight, I know that Ms. Fowler is here to speak with you. Again, she's just moving into 312 East Scranton, has that property under contract. The application materials you have in your packet describe the application. I'll also note, and we'll come back to this perhaps after Ms. Fowler's presentation when we go into public comment, that we've received some correspondence from neighbors. Certainly I've fielded a few phone calls. And then I have a letter here, the same as an email you received in the packet signed by 7 individuals that I received today. So I'll put that on camera a little later. We will give Ms. Fowler the ability to speak for now. And I actually apologize. I'll have to run into the other room to do that, so I'll be right back with you. Technical difficulties, a favorite here in COVID times. Please excuse me.
Leslie. Oh,
Hello.
hello.
I'm not sure where my audio is. Maybe I don't have audio. I
We
did
can hear
put
you.
together a little.
We
Okay.
can hear you.
Yeah.
Can't see you.
I did put together like a little presentation. I read through all of the letters that were in the notes. So I don't know if I think I can share my screen if that's okay.
Right?
Oh, I can't.
You can now.
Okay. Okay. So my chicken application, and Glenn and I were joking about the last name also being chicken related, so is that. But I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to apply. The pilot program was a big thing, which was why we were interested in moving to Lake Bluff. And I also really appreciate the letters from the neighbors. It's very important to me to be a good neighbor, and I appreciate knowing specific concerns so we can address each one of those adequately. We had concerns too. 5 years ago, we decided to keep chickens, and we researched them for a full year just to make sure that we were ready. And in the research, we realized that taking care of chickens properly eliminates a lot of the concerns that I saw in the letters, and even concerns that I had. They unexpectedly benefited our yard with chemical-free pest reduction, as they love to eat ticks and mosquitoes and other garden pests. We've often, had them in the garden, like the vegetable garden, if we've had slugs or something, and they eat all of those up, and then we put them back. But they also replenish soil. My neighbor asked for, fertilizer for her garden a lot, and she loves getting that. Not that anyone else needs to have it, but it's just an unexpected benefit that we've found. And so I feel more comfortable with the kids being in the yard with less bugs and ticks and things like that, and my pets as well. I saw that someone was concerned about the location of the coop, and we were trying to decide, looking at like maps and things. So last week we were able to visit the site and kind of review that, which I know one of the neighbors was concerned about the prior location being further west. So after being at the site, we saw that probably butting up against the garage was a better location. That way it's more hidden from view. And then it looks like from the back of the yard, it would look more like just a shed. This is kind of the look that we're hoping for with the coop and the run. We want to utilize like flower beds around it and flowering vines and vegetables that border the run, which will help make it more beautiful. And then the chickens also aid in the chemical-free garden pest control. This is kind of more of the plans that we were, after some more research, wanting to utilize. You can see from the front, it looks kind of like a screened porch. I wasn't able to get a good picture of like what it would look like on the back, but you can see from the interior rear photo, the back of the coop would just be solid. So the yard behind me would just have kind of a shed to look at instead of chickens. The pros of this model after, the years that we have had chickens is that it's very predator proof. There's hardware cloth and stone that go all around the bottom, all around the top, up on the roof. So no predators are able to come in. And it also helps with smell and moisture repelling because the roof of the run keeps water out. The floor is raised and there's sand, so any kind of water or moisture from excrement can, be pulled away. And then there's fine wood chips on the floor of the coop that help with that too. Also, it's mice proof, so it does not attract the mice. If they can't come in, they're going to go somewhere else. Regarding the smell, definitely regular cleaning is vital. We do remove the chicken excrement frequently, but similar to other like noxious nature smells, removing the moisture as soon as possible helps as well. So we utilize all these different systems to keep out or remove moisture. Like I said, like the roof for the sand and fine wood chips and the raised floor, all of that helps the moisture to leave as soon as possible. And then we also try to keep their diet and digestion systems very healthy with a very high quality grain. We do enzyme supplements and fresh water just to keep them as healthy as possible. And that definitely helps with the smell. And then the other issue is regarding predators, which was a huge concern of mine too. I had an outdoor cat who was very adventurous, and I was worried, if the chickens are there, something else might be there too. So we've utilized these really small, it doesn't have a measurement here, but they're like 2 inches by 3 inch systems. They're very dim red lights, and they blink at random, and they kind of mimic the eyes of like a larger predator than the animal or another large animal. We hang them like 2.5 feet above ground level. And that seems to have kept a lot of animals out of our yard that have definitely visited other neighbors' yards, like just as, and big animals come through sometimes. And one of my neighbors also told me one morning, he said, I was sitting out late last night. I saw a fox like come through my yard, and I saw it start to go over to yours. And then it saw, the blinking lights, and it took off running. It was out of there. And he's like, I thought, that blinking thing was stupid until I saw that. So he was a big hunter, and he thought that was really interesting and that it worked. The other thing is that the bottom border of the coop is, again, stone and that hardware cloth. So it keeps things out. If something comes by, like a raccoon or whatever, and they can't get in, they're going to go somewhere else and move along. And there will not be, I found that they don't visit. And I always check my yard too, like for tracks. And I've really only seen squirrels that are around it all. And then the final thing was noise, and in all my research too, and I found that's true over the last 4 years, that a happy chicken is a quiet chicken. When they're clean, they're happy and they're quiet. When they're safe, they feel safe, they're happy and quiet. And when they're healthy, they're happy and quiet. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much for your time, and let me know if there's any other questions too. I'm happy to answer anything.
Thank you.
Oh, there I am.
Does the committee have any questions or comments?
I do. I first of all really appreciate the detail with which you've presented your materials, Heather. They're very thorough, and that's nice to see. I love the design and the hardware cloths, and you're covering a lot of bases that we. This is probably the most thorough application and the neatest together application we've received. My question is on the schematic that you provided. I believe between your new home and the homes that are directly north of you, it looks to me like those are all garages in the backyard. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So, so
There's
you're
garages and there's fences.
right. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Hmm.
And this is this is moving your existing chickens, you're not getting new chickens?
Correct. Yes, we have chickens. They're 2 years old. That's why I did the application so early, because they're alive and existing now. So not like a theoretical thing that we're thinking we want to do.
Yep. Anybody else?
With the movement of the, from your first pictures to your new position near the garage, are you still able to cover all of the needed setbacks?
Yes, I was confused with the setbacks because I saw like older rules. What are the exact setbacks, just to refresh my memory? It needs to be away from the homes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's still the same distance from all of the homes. I believe it's a little bit further. I had them in, like, I thought it would be good, like in that little nook in the original application, but then when we went and looked at it, I was like, oh yeah, no, that's not going to work. So, and I'm open, you know, like I'm not married to any idea of this is where it has to be. You know, like I said, I want to be a good neighbor, and I don't want them to be, you know, staring at my chicken coop. So I understand that, and so, you know, that's why we wanted to move it and tuck it underneath the garage a little bit more.
Thank you.
To answer your question, so there are really two setbacks that apply. The first is that the coop, the enclosure, anything like that can't be within 10 feet of any occupied residence other than that of the licensee. The second, ordinarily applicable within the village, you know, if you're building a coop that's an accessory structure, you'd have to follow the accessory structure setbacks. In this district, I believe that's 5 feet.
So yeah, it's definitely 5 feet from everything.
The yard is completely fenced?
It is not completely fenced. It is partially fenced. I'm open to having it completely fenced, but I'm also not planning on having the chickens running around the yard. I've done that before and it was great, but the chickens that we have right now have been raised more enclosed.
Okay.
We had a few disappear by hawk when they were running around the yard, and I don't want to do that again. So they stay in their enclosure.
And I was going to say, Brian, just for what it's worth, you know, the chickens on the North Avenue chickens are not in a fully fenced yard, just for what that's worth. And when they are out of the enclosure, they're supervised for that exact reason that Heather brought up, so that, you know, and we have had a hawk, you know, in the neighborhood, very close, watching to see what happens. But chickens are pretty resourceful, especially in downtown Lake Bluff. They don't really, well, it's not like having a little bit more land where they have a lot of places to, I mean, they're out in a lot of grass. This is it's a little harder to get at them here.
Yeah.
Glenn, could you refresh our memory for the applications that we've had for chickens, the people in the village who've had chickens? Have we had any significant complaints from neighbors after the fact?
No, sir.
Okay. And even though we don't no longer, because it's no longer a pilot program, although we no longer require them to appear before the board, there is a time frame on the permit renewal, correct?
Yes, so it would, the licenses have to be renewed annually on or before March 1st. There's no fee for doing that. We just, in part because there's a limit on the number of licenses, we're just trying to make sure that people pulling licenses are continuing to engage in that activity.
And there are factors to approving that renewal, correct? Or there can be considerations for whether to approve or deny that renewal?
Yes, so there are certain conditions under which we can require an inspection. So for sure, we'll go out and inspect it before we give them a licensee their first license. After that, we can require it as a condition of renewal. We can inspect it one or more times where they've been cited for a code violation relating to animal keeping. Or again, if we think there's probable cause to think that these criteria, the chicken license program criteria, are being violated, again, we've got the right to request a reasonable inspection and go in and confirm that.
What if significant complaints have occurred during that year before the renewal?
Are you saying to date we've had no significant complaints of?
I know, but I'm remembering, and I just want to make sure, I may have forgotten, but in the original criteria for renewals, there was a consideration of neighbor complaints such as noise, smells, in that. And I can't remember if the current rules, when you renew at a year, if there's been a notable concerns or complaints that the village has investigated, whether that is a factor in approving the renewal.
Yes, so I'll check while we're speaking. I don't think, fairly sure these provisions haven't changed. I mean, the idea of, when we talk about probable cause, certainly a neighbor complaining would be, probable cause. But of course, this is still, this is a license and people are agreeing to certain things when they get a license. But it's still someone's home and someone's residence, and so we need a little bit more of a threshold to go on their property.
Sure.
Just so that you're aware, there's a comment in the Q&A, if you haven't seen it, that says from an Alex Peck, we live across the street at 305 East Scranton, and pledge our support of the chickens.
Fowler and
Thank you.
Peck.
Fowler and Peck, that's funny.
We can't get by without a pun here.
Yeah.
I was going to keep my composure before.
It'd be an exceptional day if we did. Well, I can say that, on North Avenue, we have somewhere between 25 and 35 people walking by the chickens on any given sunny day. Actually, during COVID, it was probably, between 75 and 80 people on a given day. And to the point that Brian asked, have we had complaints? The answer has been no.
Oh, hi, Glenn.
Hi, sorry.
So I just wanted to acknowledge the neighbor who was concerned that they would see it from all different angles. And Heather, maybe you've already addressed that by relocating it. But at the same time, someone could build a garden shed, right? Or any other ancillary structure that, again, a neighbor would see and would be fully within our ordinances as well, right? It's not different because it's a chicken shed. Yeah, okay.
If that's a question, yes, that's correct. That same setback would apply to a garden shed, a chicken enclosure, many other types of structures. It could be built, I believe, to a maximum height of 17 feet. Again, 5 feet off the property line. You'd have to, depending on the situation, if it was very tall, you might have to move it a bit more interior to the lot. But yes, garages, anything like that.
Not going to be 17 feet tall, though. Is it, Heather?
Wow. I was like, wow, 17 feet, like, that would be huge.
More than 6 chickens to justify the
Yeah.
17-foot chicken coop.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say, Heather, I really appreciated that you want to sort of incorporate it around your landscaping to sort of buffer it and climbing, you know, whatever, some trees nearby or shrubs or climbing vines is very thoughtful. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be a good neighbor, and I totally understand not wanting to look at ugly things out my window. I also do not want to look at ugly things out my window. So my husband was like, yeah, I was like, don't worry, I'll put vines on it. You know, I mean, and I want to do like natural stuff. I mean, I just, you know, the chickens are awesome for taking care of pests and things, and I like everything to, you know, work together as a system.
I'd just like to add that as far as being one of the 80 people that walk by on North Avenue on practically a daily basis, I've tried to see the chickens, or I've tried to hear the chickens. I've never smelled the chickens.
Right.
And so they're there, they're always there, but when I walk by the house, there's no indication that there are chickens in the yard ever.
On occasion, I think they get a little anxious about laying, you know, and you can sometimes know that they're having a problem, but not a problem, but they're vocal about what they're doing. But it's not, I mean, this morning I took a video of my backyard, and I heard dogs barking, birds singing, and no chickens speaking. So, you know.
Right.
It's a happy place.
Yeah, we've had chickens on and off across the street from me on Lincoln Avenue, and I can say only once, probably at 6:30 in the morning, I was walking my dog, and I walked right past the fence. I could hear a little quiet clucking, and that was it. There's been no substantial smell, no substantial. I wouldn't have noticed that they were in there, and certainly one of the reasons we banned in the regulations roosters, because the chickens themselves are normally very mild compared to others. I have had complaints about my new dog barking. Do we have any other questions from the committee? If not, I'd like to certainly give anyone online an opportunity to post questions or to talk, Glenn, however that works.
Certainly. So we do have one other person in the audience. I'm not sure if they'd like to speak or not. Again, if you'd like to speak, you can hit raise hand there at the bottom of your screen. Again, I did note at the start that we received an email saying that there would be a letter dropped off at Village Hall. So looks like this letter I have here is the same in content, but I did just want to share the signing page on that, just to make sure that you guys have seen these signatures, seen in the record. Again, the text of this letter without these signatures was included in your packet, and this was in my inbox today. So I apologize we weren't able to circulate that, but wanted to share that. Our one...
Also, there is, yeah, there you go, Glenn.
Yeah. Our one watcher named Elzen said, as a Lake Bluff resident several blocks from Heather's new home and a friend who has seen her current coop and chickens at her residence now, I can vouch for her responsible care for her hens and her sincere concern for her neighbors and fully support her application. Now I note they didn't participate this evening. I don't have the names of each of them, but certainly I did receive a few calls opposed to this application over the last few days. In each case, I encouraged them to submit something in writing or to appear before you this evening.
Okay. Doesn't look like we have anyone else who'd like to speak. If you do, still raise your hand. I'll point out that Glenn pointed out how the procedure for approval or denial of this can go forward. Glenn, you had put that together. We can do the straight up or down vote. We can approve with conditions. there's a little bit of flexibility there, right, Glenn?
Yes, sir, that's correct. So I would, I'd clarify that based on what we're hearing here, if you were just to make a straight recommendation of approval, we'd expect that approval reflects the site plan you have in your packet. If there was a desire that Ms. Fowler construct a different site plan, say something closer to the structure of the garage. I know there was some discussion of that, but would just suggest that you be clear. If it's not the site plan that was in the packet, would suggest you be clear about what we're recommending approval of in that motion. If that answers your question.
Yeah, the only thing that I would put out to the committee just for consideration, we have the yearly renewal. During the pilot program, we required a meeting before the board. So that would be an option you could consider. The committee could asking for them to appear before the board in a year, should there have been any complaints or issues, or we can just allow the administrative renewal of the process should there have been any complaints to go through without, because we're now no longer in the pilot program. I'm just throwing that out there for the committee to consider.
Are you ready for a motion, Brian?
I am.
Okay. Well, can I make a movement there, Glenn? I can I?
Yeah, you can make a motion.
Okay. All right. I move that we accept the proposal of Heather Fowler for her 6 chickens to move to Lake Bluff proper. And I would include the location to be closer to her garage that she presented to us. And I do not feel it's necessary for her to come back to the board next year. I mean, if they're complaints, then administratively they'll deal with that.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, can I get a roll call?
Certainly.
Or are there any other secondary motions before we go to roll call? If not, we'll go to roll call. Okay.
Okay. Member Bishop.
Aye.
Member Sorensen.
Aye.
Member Twishel.
Aye.
Co-Chair Purrier.
Aye.
And Co-Chair Renner.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Bring the
Thank
flock
you.
to Lake Bluff.
Thank you so much. My kids will be very happy. I already warned them. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for your work.
Okay, Glenn.
Yeah, so
For those of you who were on for this, you don't need to stay on for the remainder unless you're interested in hearing. We welcome that. But I think next up is the village staff report, Glenn.
sure. So I'm happy to talk about any specific items, just to be brief, maybe conserve our time. Just we gave you a staff report that has some updates about various work going on in the village surrounding the sustainability plan, this committee's sustainability goals adopted by the village board. So commercial recycling, education about our compost program, online renewals for vehicle stickers, which I note I had a chance to look at that today, and it looks to be right about half or greater, which is pretty good adoption of that. I should say our renewing online. Electrical aggregation, again, very encouraging results there that I hope we can share soon. We're still in negotiation on that, as well as with our commercial trash franchise. Some stormwater information, some capital improvements around storm sewers, crosswalks, bicycle racks, and more walkability improvements. Again, I know it's been a bit since this group met, but I hope we've have made good progress in a lot of ways since that time. So I'm happy to answer questions about any of those items or anything else that the commissioners would like to bring up.
When is the final approval of the new garbage and recycling contract?
Sure. So we don't have a date for final approval yet. I'll tell your co-chair Renner probably. I should mention for everyone that co-chair Renner also serves on the selection committee for that franchise. We've been in negotiating with proposers as recently as 2:30 today. And so I think Mr. Renner, co-chair Renner, excuse me, you'll hear personally about that soon. But I certainly hope we're getting close to a deal. I think it's some pretty, probably best not to go into the details, but some meaty topics up for negotiation, but certainly I think very aggressive pricing we've seen from the proposers, and most of them will deliver something that keeps with the specification we sought, which has it's really good recycling, really good composting service, builds on the strengths that the village has. I know one of our counterparties today said that, I hope I'm quoting him right, that the village has many things other towns are still trying to negotiate to get in their contracts. And so I like to think that we have a good model, and we're going to keep building on it in this next award.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Obviously, we can't get into all the details because final selection and contract are still open. But the thing we've talked about in the committee for a while is how to. We've done really well residentially, and we want to keep doing well. But how do we extend that to our business districts and kind of take that to the next level with them as well? So I think it's going to be a win-win for the village as a whole, for the sustainability efforts, and for the businesses all the way around. So I'm pretty excited to see the final results, but we're definitely going to continue to be kind of at the top tier for these programs on the North Shore.
Great.
And I'd certainly love to get back to some alternatives to electricity. I think we all enjoyed when we had the original aggregation for a while and missed those benefits.
Yeah, it's, there's a slide deck in there, and I'm happy to talk about specifics or even to go through the deck if you like. But in short, the first model of aggregation, we were able to find a supplier that would consistently deliver below ComEd's rate. For a while now, after ComEd, as they should and as we're grateful they did, got more aggressive pricing, we haven't been able to deliver a guaranteed savings. We haven't been able to get another provider that'll always save some money for the village and for residents, really. And there was quite a lot saved in those first years of aggregation. It was, I forget the exact number, I wasn't with the village at the time, but in the millions across just our consortium members. What we're looking at in this 2.0 model is really that, we can't serve everyone more efficiently, but we can serve some people more cost efficiently. It's not practical to give that savings back to customers. We estimated that savings across the whole village would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15,000. I think you'll see at the end of our negotiations we've done better than that, which is exciting, but still not a number that can efficiently be given back, especially when some customers can get it and some customers won't. But it'll make at no cost to anyone, it'll make a pot of money that can be used for other village programs. I know some members of our consortium will apply that to renewable energy credits. I think the numbers we're seeing are very promising. Others will apply that to local sustainability projects. I think one will keep it as general revenue, but certainly free money is the moral of the story, and it's a a good program to get it and a good opportunity to keep building on our sustainability successes.
And there was an option for purchase of renewable energy among possible for the residents, correct? Was that in there as I saw?
Sure. So there is, as it is, I believe we reported on it at your last meeting, so we didn't double dip, but as it is, the village has a community solar program that we've been soliciting residents with. I believe it was a guaranteed 20% savings on retail rates, which is great, a leading program in the state, on top of, some initiatives we have already. So I'll just note that's available today. There are options for increased renewable mixes that may be made available as an opt-in for residents. I don't know how cost competitive those are. We haven't gotten to that stage of evaluation, but certainly that's an option, a turnkey option for anyone that would want to increase their share of renewable energy consumption. Of course, at additional price, it's a modest additional price.
Glenn, can you explain why this sort of aggregation is not the same as the Texas power grid, which had a catastrophic failure?
Sure. So let me answer at the market level and then at the contract level, if I could. And the market level, I'm not an expert. I feel pretty comfortable with what I'm about to say. I don't know how much more detail I can give you, but in short, so where we are in this market is a group called PJM Interconnect. So our grid in Illinois also works with grids in Pennsylvania and other parts of the Northeast, and power flows among those different subgrids within PJM. In Texas, they have a completely different network in a lot of ways and a completely different grid. What most entities like PJM engage in is what's called a capacity auction in one form or another, where basically, you are you turn on the lights, it uses a megawatt of power, you pay for a megawatt of power, right? On the back end, some of the payment that a power plant gets is for the power they actually have to produce, and then they're essentially paid to have power generating capacity available, the capacity auction. So they're paid in blocks, I believe it's 1 or 2 years at a time, essentially to have a supply of power that the grid can draw on demand. The Texas grid, I'm forgetting the name, but it is unique in that they do no such capacity auction. All prices are spot. You pay the bare market rate. Of course, that means it's very competitive, and lower cost energy sources can compete drastically against more expensive sources to maintain. But that means that larger facilities may be harder to keep online. Before the Texas catastrophe, if you would, PJM was criticized because it engaged in one of the largest capacity auctions in the country. And so it procured a lot of capacity. This picture is from and that capacity, I should mention, tends to be more errs on the side of legacy power sources, right? So hopefully clean natural gas quite possibly subsidizes coal, or is a revenue source for coal generating plants. This, there we go, was one such, where am I at? Hang on just a moment. There we go. If this will work. This was one such criticism by the Sierra Club, essentially saying that PJM's paying to keep plants online that aren't necessary. This is, again, before Texas. This is when keeping this much idle power in reserve looked like a really bad idea. And to some extent, I'm sure someone sophisticated with this market could tell you a little bit more about it, if it really needs to be that much. But what we saw during that freeze, during that event, more energy markets than just Texas were affected. There are markets downstate in Illinois with municipally run natural gas sources that took tremendous pricing hits. There are energy utilities in, say, Kansas, Missouri, where I used to work, that saw rolling blackouts and, again, substantial pricing issues and natural gas issues. PJM, to my knowledge, saw little or none of that, and that's in part because of this this excess capacity allows it to absorb rare events like that spike up heating, cooling, energy demands. So that's the extent of, I won't even call it expertise, but that's the extent I can speak to that topic. I'll mention I'm actually, unrelated to this, putting together a speaking session for municipal officials, local municipal planners, things like that, to hear from some more expert people. We have Mark Pruitt, who's been working with the village for some time. We have someone we hope will talk about the ComEd Exelon sale and what that means for energy in Illinois. And we're working to get someone that's familiar with the legislative too. So trying to educate myself more on this topic, trying to bring more education on an important topic too. As far as this, that's a whole lot of explanation. The other answer is simple. As far as this contract, ComEd's the provider of last resort. If the aggregator screws up, ComEd still steps in, still delivers power to you, and then the aggregator and ComEd have a problem. But I know the Texas thing certainly has been on my mind, a lot of people's mind. Wanted to speak to that a bit, especially because the sustainability ramifications, I hope, are pretty interesting.
Yeah, they also had, and I can speak to the infrastructure problem that they had, where the actual plants themselves, the transmission lines, were not built to federal regulations because they were a state independent source. And as I design buildings and infrastructure across the U.S., we certainly are taking a look at climate change. And we know that those swings in hot, cold, flooding require for robust infrastructure that is designed to handle that. And certainly through no fault of the village itself, we've seen the same thing on flooding. It's like we used to design to 40. Or even if we design to 100, well, a 100-year event isn't a 100-year event anymore. So I think that was a problem that Texas had too, where they just did not want to do some of the kind of robust engineering that would normally be required, burying things at a certain depth, because they never expected or never thought the risk was manageable that they would see such an extreme in temperature fluctuation.
Now that you say that, I remember reading that they had been warned a few times that these lower temperatures were to be expected. They would be unusual, but to be expected, and that.
Thank
you, Brian and Glenn.
All right. If there's nothing else on the village staff report, would any of the members like to share any things that they've learned or come across recently since our last meeting in August?
Well, I had a question. I know it's very confusing because there's so many different landowners near the bike path, but who's responsible for the restoration work? It's so nice to see the buckthorn disappearing, and anyway, I wasn't sure who's behind that.
Got to unmute myself. That's important. Everyone's got to do it at one point in a Zoom meeting. It's required. Are you referring to the Robert McClory bike path, the north-south route? Yeah, I think we had a question about this, and some of the removal work that was being done right on the bike path is being done by the village. And so that's really just as much of a safety issue as anything. We're trying to make sure that growth, ultimately we need to eliminate buckthorn. Really our maintenance focus there is just to make sure that growth is growing in a way that keeps it out of the path of cyclists.
Well, I would say, I mean, it seems like it was more than that. It seemed like a lot was really cleared out, sort of by the crosswalk closest to maybe the fire station, I guess. But I would say that would be something to sort of make some noise about, that, you know, we're doing some restoration and making it more environmentally sensitive. Because I have heard people say, what is that? And I don't want them to think, you know, trees are being cut down unnecessarily, but instead that it's sort of restoration work. It's an improvement.
Right. A number of those were ash trees as well. I did note that. But it has come up. There are definite questions, so we can address that.
Okay. Any other
I have a quick
comments? Go ahead.
In working
Your
for, yeah, really, in working with our waste management, do we have any idea within the village the percentage of food waste that we have? In reading about, you know, nationally, that food waste is the largest issue, and if so, would it be possible for the village to supply people with compost containers to alleviate some of the waste right here at the household level?
Sure. So we don't have a exact number on how much of our local supply is food waste. We do have numbers at a regional level, and those were included in the last issue of On the Bluff. I think altogether it's in the 20 to 25% range by weight.
Seems high.
It's substantial. It's one of the larger opportunities we have to reduce our landfill consumption. You know, it's one of those things we don't talk about as much as we should probably, and the number escapes me right now, but you know, every few years we study landfill capacity in this region, and you know, I mean, the headroom is measured in years, not decades, that many of these will be filled and would need to expand. And the more we can take out of that cycle, the better. You know, there was and is some discussion around composting containers. Certainly, if you are Groot, if you're interested today, I should say, you can call Groot. They will give you a container that you can rent for, I think it's $100 a year or something, if you'd prefer to do that instead of those brown craft bags. That's not an option that's going away in the next contract. You know, one of the things I think we looked at was tweaking that, making it a requirement. But you know, one of the concerns was, you know, we know that not everyone may want to have to find room for a third container, or you know, et cetera, and you know, that was still an option for anyone in the village that's interested. Or you can again use those craft paper bags. You can put it out with your landscaping waste too.
Or if you had chickens.
Or your chicken waste.
Puppies.
So I have one thing that I know Sophie has seen, and I mentioned it to Sue Raymore, has posted through Facebook on the Lake Forest Lake Bluff news group, that she wants to start a book group for anyone concerned about pollinators, birds, bees, butterflies. She's proposing a book club to read Doug Hellamy's Nature's Best Hope. She set a date tentatively for Saturday, May 15th, and I reached out to her and I said I'd mention it, but there was a lot of interest. I checked in again this evening. There were a number of people from my street who are interested, so I think that's a great sign. Open lands people look like they're interested, but you know, great opportunity to collaborate and get to know your neighbors a little bit more while we all work together on this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, co-chair reports. Marina?
I have none specifically.
Okay. Nothing for me either. Can I get then a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Roll call?
Certainly. Member Bishop,
Aye.
Member Sorensen,
Aye.
Member Twitchell,
Aye.
Co-Chair Purrier,
Aye.
and Co-Chair Renner.
Aye.
The motion carries, and you are adjourned at 7:59.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
It's good to see you all.
It's good to see you too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.